First speaker is Rosabel. Rosabel will be doing a 10 to 12-minute speech. The title of her speech, it's a pathway speech under the innovative planning. And the title of her speech is Reflect on Your Youth Path. Rosabel Young, reflect on your youth path. Rosabel.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you. Yes, reflect on your path is the last speech of every path. And I am now finishing my second path in innovative planning. The innovative planning path teaches us to think creatively and to lead others with a creative style. This fits perfectly with our theme for today. Can entrepreneurship be taught? My answer is a big yes. From following to managing, then to leading. You can be creative at every step. Just like when we grow up, we first learn how our elders do things. We're taught to follow them. We're taught to obey. It could be our parents, an aunt, or uncle, or grandparents. But sometimes we end up following the example of an older brother or sister. Maybe we selected a mentor who can even sometimes get us in trouble. But we do learn from those mistakes too. As entrepreneurs, we think, who were our role models? Maybe we started imitating what they did back in school, maybe teachers. And as we imitated them, we saw that they were being creative. And then we also started thinking on our own, being creative ourselves. Then eventually we were mentoring younger followers, not necessarily younger by age, but maybe newer members of a group or a class. I was lucky that when I was young, I lived in a small town and all the grades were together in one room. And we were encouraged to teach each other. I remember there was a 12-year-old girl there and I was about 6 or 7. And I learned a lot from her because she had already been out in the farm and her parents owned a grocery store in the town. And I prefer to learn from her after school than in school. And then of course, my aunt, who was a teacher herself, was a great mentor for me. This is the same thinking process we have when we get a job. It could be maybe we've gone through several jobs and maybe we didn't have good mentors at some jobs and that's why we left. And we have to be alert. Those of us who have a side hustle or started being entrepreneurs through a side hustle, maybe we did so because we weren't satisfied with our jobs, but then we couldn't just walk away. You know, job security and certain benefits, and of course, the need for funds to support ourselves and pay our debts, our rents and our electricity bill these days and our heating bill, which I'm sure for most of us has skyrocketed this past year. Despite that insecurity, as entrepreneurs, we have to think creatively and take risks. I think one of us here in our membership talked about the importance of taking risks when we're entrepreneurs. As we're creative and we take risks, we have to weigh the pros and cons. When I was following the examples of my mother and older friends, first in Barcelona, my mother was an artist, and then my friend Cisco, who was an experienced artist and event organizer. I saw, and he told me, mistakes that he had made and how he learned from them, and how he also took risks, not always just trying one thing at a time, but sometimes having 4 or 5 projects out there and moving them, advancing them slowly, and watching which ones were going to fail and which ones were more likely to be successful. Then when you're faced with crisis, this is another lesson I learned. We all had to face the crisis of Zoom, the world over. At that time, you can put your minds together. That's the time to mastermind. We put our heads together and Cisco and I came up with the idea of, instead of having gallery art exhibits, having them panel discussion style on Zoom. It was a new thing. I didn't know if anybody else was doing art exhibits on Zoom, but if you browse the internet now, there are several. Don't be afraid of competition. My mother once told me, Imitation is the best compliment you can have in life. Don't think of competition as bad. You learn from them and they learn from you, and you both end up looking better in the end. And then they become your friends. Another important lesson that I've learned through my path work in innovative planning, as it helped me grow my little company, the Wentworth Norton Group. As your team grows, it's also important to pay attention to each person. Are they growing as individuals? And get feedback from them. Are they growing in the direction they want to grow? Ask them what are their goals, especially with volunteers. In one of my presentations, I discussed the example of Mario Gutierrez, who was helping me with hammer and nails and his toolkit to fix up some things in the art gallery as I was reopening it after COVID. And then it turned out that he was an artist. And now he's helping me run the gallery in Barcelona and keeping it open, even though I'm not there. In fact, it was his goal to be an artist and to get fame and fortune that way, and hopefully he will in the future. And there he was, just a handyman door to door at, money as catch can kind of thing. And this was an opportunity for him and for me, and ended up being a win-win situation, because I asked him about his goals and what he liked, and he started looking at the art that was coming in as he was hammering and nailing, and he said, oh, I do some of that too. And then my team grew even more. As Toastmasters, all of us are doing these activities in paths for our own benefit. But obviously, except those of us who can be retired and independently wealthy, which is not me and probably none of us here, we all have outside activities where we have to continue to do work to support ourselves. And as entrepreneurs, we're hoping that that work is independent and for ourselves, creative. But the creative process always continues to be one of learning from example, following, making mistakes, learning again, and then mentoring others. I think that is a very important lesson. And don't be afraid to try something new, but always have a plan B. Start with your vision. At one point in your life early on, you wanted to be X, Y, Z. Never abandon that vision. And if you have a bad boss that discredits an idea that you put forward, don't let it get you down. Someday maybe you'll be doing it on your own and hiring him to work on your team, but never turn it into a negative. Put yourself in their shoes, whether they're a boss, a mentor, or one of your subordinates in a job situation, and turn it into a win-win situation. There's always something that you can learn from each other. Gather your team, delegate tasks, don't overwork yourself. That's another important thing I've learned here, because so many things can happen quickly. There's a tendency to have an immediate action totally in your own hands, but you can always delegate that too. Again, have a plan B so that you can be prepared to delegate and face challenges and emergencies. Encourage your team and followers to be creative, and also to evaluate you. Evaluate yourself and also have them evaluate you, and always ask for feedback. Otherwise, you won't grow. Look to the future and then make your own path. Create your own yellow brick road to success. Thank you very much. I know I'm under time, but I think that we want to have plenty of time for Taya to discuss entrepreneurship, and also for our second speaker. So I'll turn it back to you now, Madam Toastmaster. Thank you.